If you're a channel regular, you'll know that Adobe Fresco is my preferred app for drawing and doing simple animations, but that doesn't mean I don't like Procreate. In fact, Procreate actually does have one motion feature that I do really like. So because of that, I'm going to use Procreate in this video to do an animated morph, changing a word into an object back to a word. Okay, so I chose to do trick or treat with a little skull because today's Halloween, but you're not going to be seeing this on Halloween, so this was probably a poor choice. But regardless, this is what we got. I'm going to move forward. These are the three things I'm going to morph. I'm going to morph trick into treat, and then treat into this smiling skull face, and then back into trick, so it just loops infinitely. So I have each of these on their own layer: trick, treat, and the skull. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn these back on, and then I'm going to go up to the top tool thing up here and choose canvas and then animation assist. So what this does is it just takes all of my layers and puts them down on this timeline. So if we hit play, you would just see it would cycle through them very quickly. This defaults to like 15 frames per second, which is a little too much for the kind of animation we're going to be doing now. So I like to bring this down to 10 or 12. I think we'll stick with 10 for these purposes. Then we've got some other options here. There's onion skin frames, and onion skin opacity. The onion skin frames is the amount of frames before and after the frame you're working on that you're going to see. If that's a little confusing, it'll make more sense as we get going. But I'm going to bring this down to 1. So it just shows me the previous and the next frame. And again, if that's confusing, just keep following along. And the opacity we can adjust as needed. This just is how much we can see the previous and the next frame. And then the next thing down here is onion skin colors. This is the one feature that I mentioned before that I really like about Procreate, and it's something that I wish Fresco had, and maybe they'll add someday. But what this does is it allows you to control the colors of your onion skins. And this is really helpful when you're doing this sort of morph thing, because it can get a little confusing. And again, you'll see what I'm talking about as we get going. But if we go in here and we go to onion skin colors, you can set these to different colors. As I mentioned, we're starting with trick and then we're morphing it into treat. So to do a morph like this, all I'm going to do is click on add a frame. And now we've got a frame in between these two. So if you'll look, you'll see that trick is now blue and treat is orange because it's previewing it in those colors that we chose. I'm going to adjust the opacity so we can see this a little bit better. So in order to do a morph like this, what we're trying to do is slowly, well, sort of slowly, but a little bit at a time, change the word trick into the word treat. So I'm going to grab my brush and I'm going to grab white, because actually, I'm not going to grab white because these are the skull, and the treat lettering is going to be a lot easier to draw with a black outline. So I'm going to do it all as a black outline, but to make it a little less confusing, I'm going to temporarily change the background color to like a gray. That way we can see the line work. Okay, so I'm going to grab black. And I'm going to use this Hamrick ink solid. These are some Photoshop brush, these are some Procreate brushes that I used to use regularly when I worked in Procreate. I don't really use Procreate that often anymore, but these are some good brushes that I like, made by my friend Ryan Hamrick. Maybe I'll remember to link them in the description if you're interested. We've got this T, it's blue, and then the other T in treat is orange. So what we're trying to do is slowly change this outer T so that it becomes the T below that. So what I'm doing here is just expanding that down and moving it closer to this position. So I'll come down here and then I'm moving it over and I'm starting to like round out that tip so it's not pointy anymore. And if you look, you'll see like the T in trick is like shaky, kind of like, you know, spooky vibes, horror lettering style. And treat is nice and smooth. So I'm keeping some of that like shake, but smoothing it out a little bit because we need to get it to be smooth. We don't have to do it all in one shot. So just widening it and then pulling it down so that it gets close to where we want it to be. And now we'll do the same for the R. So what we can do here is just pull this over, make it a little bit wider, and then shorten that leg, and then just draw sort of like in between. Now the R on treat curves up. If we click over here, you'll see it curves up like this. So what we can do is start to bend the R and trick up like that to get it closer to where it's going to go. And then up here we can just sort of draw in between the two shapes because they're pretty close. And then you'll see the opening of the R, the counter of the R is over to the right a little bit. The treat one is a little bit further, so it's back, and this one's that way. So what we'll do is just go in between the two like that. So if you cycle through, you'll see it sort of is a step in between. And now it gets slightly trickier because we're doing different letters now. The first two were repeating letters, so it's a little less tricky, but this isn't too bad either. So we've got the I, and we can start where they're the same. So that's like the top and bottom. So we can just start to expand the top of the I to get wider, like that I is. And then at the bottom, we can shorten it and widen it up a little bit. And then make it wider here where the E expands, and then taper it where the E cuts in. Just like that. So we're just slowly changing the I to get it to be closer to an E. And this side we can just make a little bit wider. Okay, so we've got the A here, and this is the C. The top is very similar, so we can go start there. And then what we can do is pull down the top of the C to start to fill the bottom of the A. And then just pull this side in a little bit. And then what I would do down here for this part is just start to pull it in and taper it in on itself so that it can just become part of the left side of the A. Okay, so the K becoming a T, I think what we can do is just push the two legs of the K together to form the one leg of the T. So we can just start bringing this one in over to this side, and we'll just shorten that leg, then widen that gap right there, and then start pulling that part of the K over. Then we can widen this like that. And there we go. So at this point, we'll just grab white, fill in these letters. So now if we just taper through that, you'll see it's already starting to happen. So what we'll do now is we'll add a frame in between those two. And now we've got this new starting point. So we're already starting even closer. So we can come over to the beginning here and just make this T. Let's switch to black first. We'll draw the T, and we'll make it less shaky, but still a little bit. And then we're just moving it slowly closer to where the original is. And you can see we're pretty much there already. So we'll just shorten that a little bit. And then here, we're pretty much there as well. So we can just start to pull this up a little bit more like that. Then this is pretty much there. I'm just sort of tracing it, but just making it a little slightly shakier. So we can just pull the E back a little bit and then pull in the center part a little bit. You just don't want to like make it change drastically very quickly, because then it won't have that natural morphy flow. Okay, so we can do this A. So we can start to pull this in fully. And then maybe have like a piece start moving over to form the crossbar in the A. Then that can come down more. And then we can keep moving this part of the K over like that. Straighten that out. Pull that up. Close this a little bit. And then pull that in like that. Then we can start having that area close in. Let's grab our white, fill that in. And now we can toggle through, and you'll see it's looking pretty good. So what we can do now is, you guessed it, add in another frame. We probably just need one more. So what we'll do here is we'll just always forget to switch back to black. So I'm just tracing pretty much the orange one here because it's already morphed. We just have to catch up the other letters. So we just got to redraw this. And we can pull this up a little further. That one's pretty much there, so I'll just do it all the way there. So this is pretty much there. I'm doing it almost all the way, but just left a little bit of a little indent there. And then what we'll do here is just pull this most of the way, but just have like a little indent there, and then maybe one up here, like that. And what we can do to fully test this is to just like turn off the skull, and we can go like that. We can see, we could also set this to ping pong, so it kind of goes to the end and then back. So you'll see that morph is working pretty well. So that's enough. Now we can do the next one. So we'll start with the T, we'll start with tree, and then we'll add a frame in between tree and the skull. So this one is a little bit trickier because we don't have the letter for letter morph that we had in the other thing, but we can do it the same way. So we can just find areas where they're the same and then expand upon those areas. So sometimes I'll just start with that kind of thing. So for example, we got the top of the skull here, and we got the top of the E, and that shape matches. So what we could do is just sort of pull this. Wow, every single time we forgot to switch. Like how I said we, even though I'm the one with the problem here. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is just pull that top of the T like that. It's kind of a big jump, but I think it'll be okay. And that'll form the top of the head. So what we can do here is do the same thing with this, with the T, start to pull that up. And then we need to just sort of push this in because tree is wider than the skull. So to do that, we'll just start pulling this T in to the edges to make it morph into the center. And we can do the same thing over here. We can sort of taper it a little bit too to sort of reference the skull shape because it goes in there. If you look at the skull, we got these two eyes, and if we look at tree, we've got the two counters right in a spot where they could be eyes. So we can use that as a good spot to like make the morph. So what I'll do here is I will start making this R shape bigger to go over towards the eye. Like I'm already starting to make it mimic the shape of the eye. Then we'll do the same thing on this side. So I'm just making that, the counter of the A get bigger so that it can grow to become the eye. So we've got this leg of the R, and then it's like right where the teeth are. So what we can do is take that R and start following that path, but have it start to like cut in where the teeth would be. And this tooth actually lines up nicely with the A right there. So that what we can do here is just kind of pull that down and then shorten it. So the mouth is all black, but we've got this line along the bottom. So we need to make that. So what I'm thinking is, let me erase that. What we can do is just start making a line come out like that, and then we'll just slowly bring it across the bottom. So we can use this leg of the R on this side by pulling this over and then pulling that in like that. Then we can just move that line up so it's not just disappearing out of nowhere. We can pull that over there so we're not just completely getting rid of stuff. And then this A, the A we can just trace down like that. Then we'll just leave a little bit of an opening there so it's not too abrupt of a change. So the skull's got that nose right there. And you can see it happening there, and there's this opening between the R and the E, that right there. So that can become the nose. So what we'll do is just move this up and then start making that shape. So as you can see, we've got like the teeth starting and then the nose and the eyes. Well, we can actually fill those in so it's easier to see at this point. And now we just need to sort of deal with the other lines from the letters here. And I think the easiest thing to do would be to just resolve them. And by resolve, I mean just sort of like get rid of them so that we can just let we're not going to need them, is what I'm saying. So to get rid of them, what we'll do is just start to thin out those lines from the letters. So this one, we've already moved up there. So then this like inner stuff, I'm just making these lines there, but thinner. And that way, in the next stage, we can just like make them sort of disappear. So what I'll do now is I will grab the white paint bucket and fill this in. And now if you look, you'll see it's already getting close. So here we will just go ahead and add a frame in between the two, just like we've been doing, and continue our trajectory. So let's switch back to the black for the first time I'm remembering. And I'm gonna start with the eyes just because I can see them right here. So I'm just moving the shape that we had from before, making it bigger and closer to where it's gonna end up. You can do the same thing with this nose shape. And then for the teeth, I'm just doing like an in-between. Like see how there's this area, the blue, and then the orange where they sit. So if you just draw in between them, it'll just be a natural transition in without looking abrupt. So we'll just continue this line over here down to make that bigger. And let's see. So we've got the line on the side of the skull, and we've got the T. So we need to resolve the T. So I'm just going to make this smaller, pull that in like that. And then we can use this little negative space thing to start to make this cutout shape on the side of the skull. And then we can just maybe pull this line in since it's pretty much there. And then start to pull this top line up so the head shape is there. And then we can just continue getting rid of the T on this side. And then we can pull this side in like that. So we've got this dark orange part and this blue part, and you can see that we're trying to get over here. So I'm just going to draw in between that like that. And then we just got these little lines that are left that we need to sort of resolve. So what I'm going to do is just make them a little thinner and then closer to the eye, because then when the eye gets bigger, they'll just sort of disappear into it. We can do the same thing with those. That. Because you just don't want things to just disappear randomly. Fill it in. And now we can look. Getting close. So let's do one more frame in between. We may need more than just one more frame, but we'll see what this does. So let's move this almost all the way up. The nose is pretty much there, so we can pull that up. And I'm just drawing like the in-between point. So our skull has these like cheek lines here, which we don't have anything for those yet. So I'm just gonna start to like make those pop out. The teeth are ready, so I'm just gonna trace those. Looks like the mouth is good. And I'm just gonna do like one extra little spot there. See how I did that like little taper in, just to show these 2 points sort of meeting and like not quite there yet. The top of the head is good, but we've got this like a lump here, and then there's that lump on the side of the skull here, like that. So I'm thinking what we can do is just push that down so that it can move in to become that spot. And then we can do, I don't know, something similar here. We'll just kind of go like that. And then this can be smaller. And then I think what we can do is just have like a little thin connecting line here that we can just sort of break afterwards. Cool, so I think we can do one more. Might not need it, but why not? Especially because there's these little lines showing the like inside of the eye socket that I think would be nice to start doing. So let's add a frame and then just come in and finish up these last little pieces. Whoops, I was tracing the wrong one. See, this is why the color is helpful. So we can look, so blue is previous. So we can pull these lines in. So I'm making them just a tiny bit smaller. And this has already been there. Teeth are already good, so I'm just tracing those over again. And then we can just make this all the way through without having the divot anymore. Okay, so this spot right here, let's just do almost a go like that, I guess. So this area on the right where there's a little bit of extra stuff, I'm just gonna pull this. I'm actually gonna do that detail in just white in a second. So I'm just gonna make this a little bit of a lump there. Let's erase this. And I'm gonna grab white, and what I'm gonna do is fill this in as usual, but I'm gonna like start to make that inner line start to happen. Just like a little piece of it, and then that like that. And then this over here, I'm just gonna, no, that's too much. Just make like a little remnant of that white to just sort of make it a little bit more natural. So now if we hit play, you'll see these flow through each other. So let's go back and change our background color to black. And what we can do temporarily is do the hold and put that to like 5 frames for each of the main points. So like trick, and then treat. We can go ahead and hold that for 5 seconds, and then go to the skull and hold that for 5 seconds. And then if we play that, you'll see that morphs pretty well. I would like to morph it back to the, I would like to morph it back to the word trick. You could set this to ping pong, so it just goes back and forth, but I like a more fluid, just like a full transition as opposed to going to the end and bouncing back. So in order to do this, it's the same sort of process. I'll go ahead and duplicate my trick frame, and then I'm going to drag it to the very end. It still has a hold duration on it, so I'm going to get rid of that. And now let me turn off the hold duration on the skull and add a frame in between these two. And now I'm just going to morph the skull back into treat. So I think this one actually might be easier to draw in white. What I'm going to do is take this part of the skull and just start pushing it out here to become the T, like that. And then we can start making the eye smaller like this. And then we can like widen that nose area. We can also expand that little white area on the side of the nose to become this eye, like that. And then we can expand that opening of the nose. And then we can expand the bottom of the eye here, and then just start to make that smaller. Then we can have that line sort of moving into that side. And then we've got the K, so we can just sort of break apart that side, and then maybe have like another piece coming out like that, so we can build the K off of that. And then start to close the mouth to become that part of the K. And then I'm just going to shorten the top of the skull, but like reference the letter shapes below them. Start to open up this area a little bit to do this part of the R. And then maybe we can have, let's see, these two teeth can start to come together to get to be the bottom of the C there. And then we can pull that in and then shorten that tooth like that. And then these two teeth can come together and start to get pointy there. And then we can start to just bring something down for that part of the R. Then we don't want to make the bottom disappear completely, so what I'm going to do is just start to thin that area out. Now we can fill that in. Add a new frame. And just continue this trajectory. So we'll take this shape, pull it out like that. Can already make that T shape. We can shorten that side a little bit, pull that part of the R down, pull this part down a little bit more. We can make this start to separate completely, so just like maybe some little pieces. Can start to expand this K area. I'm realizing that I started making a separate like part for the K already, so I'll just keep going with that. Can pull this in like that, lower that part of the T, bring that in to become the R, then shorten the top of this eye a little bit more so it starts to match the counter of the, shrink the eye so that it becomes the counter of the R. Wow, confusing. Okay. And then again, doing the same thing with this eye to match the center part of the C. And then it's just sort of matching the shapes and getting them closer to where they need to be, a little bit at a time. So we can go ahead and fill that in. And we're almost there. Do one more frame, and then you know, the same sort of thing. Just sort of doing like a halfway point on these now. And we can like separate that, but have it still connected a little bit so it's not just an abrupt change. Okay, the K is like the biggest thing now. That, and then this like center area, we can just kind of go like that. Now we can just sort of like resolve this little area. So sometimes I'll like to do like little spots like that. It's like it just kind of was like psh, almost like you pulled something and it just sort of ripped apart a little bit. Okay, so that should be enough for this transition. So what we can do is delete that last one because it was just for reference. And now if we play this through, so if you notice, it looks a little bit weird because the morphs are like moving and wiggling and stuff like that. But then when we hold, it looks a little bizarre. So what I like to do instead of holding is I like to just redraw each of these twice and then duplicate that as many times as necessary to get it to hold. And that'll make it have a continuous wiggle, which is referred to as like a line boil. And that'll make it just constantly flow without that weird stop action. All I'm gonna do is just add a frame. And in order to not see the next frame, I'm just gonna add an extra frame that I'll delete afterwards. And now I'm looking at this. So I'm gonna turn the background again to gray so I can use the black line work again. And I'm gonna switch to the non-streamlined version of this brush so I can get that shaky line quality. And all I'm doing is just tracing this word. I'm not trying to make it different. I'm just trying to get as close as I can while moving relatively quickly. Okay, so you're just gonna do this twice. So I'm gonna add another frame while still keeping that extra one in, and then I'll delete that one afterwards. Okay, I can delete that extra frame. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna turn off all these other frames to just show you what I'm talking about in terms of this line boil. So I just have these 3 frames turned on right now. And if we play this, you'll see it has this natural rhythm vibration to it. That's referred to as a line boil, and it's just like the imperfections in the line quality from just drawing something multiple times. But this has this like consistent look, and you need at least 3 frames for this to work, because otherwise it'll just look like it's sort of flashing back and forth. But 3 has this inherent rhythm to it where it just will wiggle and look natural. So you can take this sequence and just duplicate it as many times as you need. So an easier way to do this, one thing that I like to do first actually is name these in case I get mixed up. So we'll go to the third one and name that trick 2. And then this one, trick 3. And that way we know our loop is in the right order. So you could duplicate these all individually, but what I find to be easier is to like put them into a group together like this, like a temporary group. And put them in the right order. Okay. And now what I can do is duplicate this group a few times. I don't know how I have an extra group here, but what I do now is I just, it's a little bit tedious, but it's actually less work than just, you know, duplicating one at a time. I find this to be faster. So I'm just dragging these out into my document, into my regular timeline. The reason we have to do this is because if they were in a group, they would show up as one frame, because a group is treated as a single frame. which can be helpful if you want to have like a couple different layers appearing in one frame. All right, so now we can delete this extra stuff. And now we've got this whole sequence of just the word trick. So this will be helpful so it can be up on the screen long enough that we can read it. So I'm gonna move over to treat. I'm gonna turn on treat, and I'm gonna go ahead and add a frame, and I'm gonna trace this twice. So I'm gonna fast forward through for doing this for the treat in the skull, and then I'll be back. Switch to my streamline brush because this has nice smooth curves. So if you'll notice here, I went a little tight on the R and I ended up not changing it because I wanted to show you another thing that you can do to make it a little bit smoother when you're doing something with smooth letters like this. The other one is a little bit more forgiving because it's already choppy, so it has that energy. So instead of adding a frame at the end, what you can do here is go back to the first frame and then add a frame in between the two. And here you'll see the differences between them. Like this is a clear area. And what you can do is just draw the middle ground in between them, and then that'll make the flow a little bit more fluid or smooth. Okay, now we have everything here. I estimated how long I wanted each one to be up. Hopefully it looks good. Let's check it out. Now you can see how redrawing those frames, it makes it a lot more fluid and has a lot more energy because it's constantly in movement. Whereas when I just held the frames, it just kind of would be dynamic and then pause and then be boring and then go. Now it's just the whole time looking fun, looking wiggly, looking ready to go trick-or-treating. Hopefully you enjoyed this process and are inspired to do some of your own. If you make some cool morphs and you share them on social media, make sure you tag me so I can check them out. And I will see you in my next video. Hey, did you know that I do live streams every Friday? I do. It's at 10:30. You should come hang out. I do drawings live, answer questions. I do all kinds of fun stuff. Also, have you heard of the channel memberships? All of my super supporters and above get their name drawn and included in all the videos that I make while they are members. There's also special bonus members only videos. I do member question answer videos. I'm going to be doing some live drawings just with the members soon. There's lots of cool stuff happening, so check it out. All right, good talk.